All right, when we first learned the major scale, the first way we learned it was by counting whole steps and half steps. Now, with these other ways that we're learning to figure out the minor scale, you won't need to do this all that often, but it's still important to know because it kind of tells us the makeup of what's in the minor scale. And there are some situations where you're just kind of like, and you just have to calculate it out. So here is the pattern. Let's do our C minor scale again. Okay, so here's a C. So it is whole step. So our first whole step, half step pattern. Our first interval is a whole step. Our second interval is a half step. So whole half, that needs a flat. There we go. Whole half, and then two whole steps. So whole step. Now remember that if this was a flat, to get to a whole step, sometimes you might be going to another half or another flat, right? Or accidental or whatever. In our case, we're not. E flat to F is the whole step. So another whole step. So whole, half, whole, whole, and then a half step. A flat. And then a whole step, which gets me to B flat. And then another whole step, which gets me back to C. So whole, half, whole, half, whole, whole, right? And that makes our minor scale. Now, if you remember the previous one we just did, if we took a major scale and lowered the third, sixth, and seventh, we would get to the same place. Okay, so whole, half, whole, half, whole is our alterations of half steps and whole steps. Let's look at that on a piano. Okay, here's our piano keyboard. Okay, so if we step through the pattern, so let's start on C. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. Okay, so whole step here, half step here, whole step here, whole step here, half step, whole step, whole step. Oops. It's hard to hit some of these accidentals with the little tiny mouse. Okay, so that's our pattern. Let's do another one. Oh, what's a key that we should try? Let's do G minor. Okay, and let's do it with no key signature. Let's just plop it in and see where we land. So here's a G. So if we're trying to make a G minor scale, we know the first note is going to be G, right? So let's do our whole steps and half steps. So we can go, so our first note is going to be an A because that's a whole step. And then we need to go to a B flat because that's a half step. Let's look down here. So here's G. To A is a whole step. To B flat is our half step. So there's B flat. That gets us to here. So now we need a whole step to C. And another whole step to D. And then a half step to E flat. Flat. Where were we? E flat. And then a whole step to F. And then another whole step gets us back to G. Now, this one looks a little interesting because if you're paying attention, you may notice that in previous scales, let's jump back, we have lowered our third, sixth, and seventh, right? But here it appears that our third and sixth, but not seventh, is lowered, right? Can you guess why? Can you remember why that might be happening? Think about it for just a second. I'll give you a clue. Think about the G major, what the G major scale looks like.